In the shadow of Nazi-occupied Athens, a British princess made a choice that would mean the difference between life and death for an entire Jewish family. She was deaf, dismissed by many as fragile, yet she possessed a courage that would echo through generations. When the Gestapo came knocking at her door, she used her very disability as a weapon of deception, feigning ignorance while harboring those marked for extermination just meters from Nazi headquarters. This is the extraordinary story of Princess Alice of Battenberg, a woman who transformed personal struggle into heroic purpose, whose quiet acts of defiance saved lives, and whose legacy would one day anoint kings. But her path to becoming one of the righteous among the nations began not in wartime Athens, but in the gilded halls of Windsor Castle, where a great-grandmother's love would shape a destiny none could foresee. Today, we unlock the vault of one of history's most remarkable royal stories, a tale that spans from Victorian splendor to Nazi terror, from personal tragedy to ultimate triumph. You'll discover how a childhood operation left an indelible mark that would later become her greatest strength. We'll witness her transformation from a privileged princess to a woman who chose poverty over palace life, and ultimately, how her wartime courage earned her a place among history's greatest heroes. But perhaps most remarkably, you'll learn how this forgotten princess's sacrifice connects directly to the crown that sits upon King Charles III's head today. A connection so profound, it was woven into the very fabric of his coronation ceremony. This is not merely a story of royal duty, but of a woman who discovered that true nobility lies not in titles or tiaras, but in the courage to risk everything for what is right. The Princess Born in Shadow and Light. The year was 1885, and within the hallowed walls of Windsor Castle, Queen Victoria herself witnessed the birth of her great-granddaughter, Princess Victoria Alice Elizabeth Julia Marie of Battenberg. Yet even in that moment of imperial grandeur, fate had already marked this child with a challenge that would define her extraordinary life. Alice was born deaf, a condition that in the Victorian era was often seen as a tragic limitation. But what the world perceived as weakness would become her greatest strength. Under her mother's devoted guidance, young Alice mastered the art of lip reading in English, German, French, and Greek. She learned to navigate a world that often failed to understand her, developing an empathy for the marginalized that would later save lives. Picture this remarkable child, moving through the glittering courts of Europe, her eyes constantly watching, reading lips, understanding conversations others thought were private. She was learning, even then, to see what others missed, to hear what wasn't spoken aloud. These skills, honed in the drawing rooms of royalty, would one day deceive the Gestapo itself. In 1903, Alice married Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark, entering a world of political upheaval and royal exile. Their love story unfolded against the backdrop of a changing Europe, and together they had 5 children, 4 daughters who would marry into German nobility, and 1 son, Philip, who would become the Duke of Edinburgh and consort to Queen Elizabeth II. But Alice's path was never destined to be smooth. The Greek royal family faced constant political turmoil, forced into exile not once but twice. Her husband, Prince Andrew, was sentenced to perpetual banishment after being blamed for military defeats. The family that had once lived in palaces now wandered Europe, their future uncertain, their fortunes scattered. The crucible of the soul. The years of displacement and loss took their toll on Alice's spirit. After converting to Greek Orthodoxy in 1928, her religious devotion intensified into what her family could not understand. In 1930, she began experiencing what were described as religious visions. She believed herself to be the bride of Christ, claimed to have divine healing powers. Her family, unable to comprehend her spiritual awakening, had her diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and forcibly institutionalized in Switzerland. But here, in one of history's most shocking medical scandals, she became the victim of Sigmund Freud's misogynistic theories. Freud, consulted on her case, recommended repeatedly X-raying her ovaries to kill off her libido and induce early menopause, a brutal procedure that left her with lifelong health problems. For over 2 years, Alice pleaded her sanity from behind sanitarium walls, separated from her husband and children. The trauma of this experience, the betrayal by those who should have protected her, might have broken a lesser spirit. Instead, it forged something unbreakable within her, a clarity of purpose that would guide her through the darkest chapter of the 20th century. When she finally emerged, Alice had made a profound choice. She turned her back on conventional royal life, choosing instead to live in a humble flat in Athens, dedicating herself to faith and charity. The princess who had once worn diamonds now dressed in simple clothes, her only jewels, the compassion in her heart and the steel in her soul. Athens under the swastika. By 1941, when the Axis powers invaded Greece, Alice found herself in a city that would soon become a charnel house. The Nazi occupation brought systematic starvation, the Great Famine that would claim 300,000 civilian lives in Athens alone. During the winter of 1941 to 42, the daily death toll reached 1,000 people. Bodies lined the streets as the occupiers plundered everything of value, leaving the population to starve. But Alice's situation was uniquely perilous. Her only son, Philip, was serving as a British naval officer, fighting against the very forces that now controlled her city. Meanwhile, her 4 daughters had married German princes, some of whom held positions as Nazi officers. She was caught between 2 worlds, her family literally fighting on opposite sides of the greatest conflict in human history. Living just meters from Gestapo headquarters, Alice threw herself into humanitarian work. She organized soup kitchens, sheltered orphaned children, and tended to the sick and dying. Those who witnessed her during this time marveled at the sight of a British princess dressed in austere clothing, working tirelessly among Athens' poorest residents. But it was in 1943 that Alice would face her greatest test and achieve her most heroic triumph. The family that fate delivered. Among the Jews of Athens lived the Cohen family, Hymaki Cohen, a prominent community leader and former member of the Greek parliament, his wife Rachel and their children. When Hymaki died in 1943, his family suddenly found themselves in mortal danger. The Nazis had begun the systematic deportation of Greek Jews to Auschwitz, and Rachel Cohen, now a desperate widow, faced the unthinkable fate that awaited 87% of Greece's Jewish population. It was then that Princess Alice made a choice that would define her legacy forever. Without hesitation, she offered Rachel Cohen and her children sanctuary in her own home. She knew the penalty for hiding Jews was death. She knew that discovery would mean not just her own execution, but the destruction of the very family she was trying to save. Yet she opened her doors without question. "This is a family in need," she told the few trusted confidants who knew of her secret. "That is all that matters." For months, the Cohen family lived in a sparsely furnished upstairs room of Alice's residence, existing in silence and terror. Alice personally brought them food and tea, engaging them in warm conversations about religion and life, offering comfort in their darkest hour. Despite her hearing impairment, she created a sanctuary of hope in a world gone mad. The moment of ultimate courage. The danger was constant and real. When Nazi officials grew suspicious, they came to Alice's door. In that critical moment, as the Gestapo stood before her demanding answers, Alice deployed the most brilliant deception of her life. She greeted them calmly, and when they questioned her about visitors or inhabitants in her home, she simply acted as if she couldn't understand their German. The princess, who could lip read in 4 languages, suddenly became a confused, deaf woman who couldn't comprehend what these men wanted from her. The Gestapo, likely under orders to treat this royal woman cautiously, left without discovering the Cohens. Alice's perceived disability, the very condition that had caused her such struggle throughout her life, had become the shield that protected innocent lives. But the danger came from within her own family as well. When her daughters visited Athens, they grew suspicious of sounds from the upper floor. "Who is upstairs?" they asked. Once again, Alice played the part of the hard-of-hearing woman, claiming it was only a nanny. Her composed deception, even toward her own children, demonstrated extraordinary courage and quick thinking. The Phoenix rises. Thanks to Alice's protection, the Cohen family survived the Holocaust. They remained hidden under her roof until the liberation of Athens in October 1944. After the war, Alfred Cohen, one of Rachel's sons, would say simply, "She saved the whole family. I wouldn't be alive if it hadn't been for her." But Alice's story was far from over. In 1949, she took the extraordinary step of founding her own Greek Orthodox nursing order, the Christian Sisterhood of Martha and Mary. This once glamorous great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria gave up all her worldly possessions, selling her remaining jewellery to fund a clinic and orphanage in Athens. From that point forward, Alice often dressed in a simple grey nun's habit. She had transformed from princess to pauper to saint, finding in service to others the purpose that had eluded her in palaces. When she attended Queen Elizabeth II's coronation in 1953, she made headlines by arriving in her nun's habit, a stark and dramatic contrast to the pageantry surrounding her. The recognition that came too late. For decades, Alice's wartime heroism remained largely unknown. She never sought recognition for what she had done. She considered it nothing more than her Christian duty to help fellow human beings in dire need. It was only in 1993, nearly 25 years after her death, that Yad Vashem, Israel's official Holocaust Remembrance Authority, bestowed upon her the title, Righteous Among the Nations. In a deeply moving ceremony in 1994, her son, Prince Philip, and daughter Princess George of Hanover travelled to Jerusalem to accept the honour on her behalf and plant a tree in her memory. Prince Philip spoke with characteristic understatement. I suspect that it never occurred to her that her action was in any way special. She was a person with deep religious faith, and she would have considered it to be a totally human action to fellow human beings in distress. The crown's sacred connection. Alice's final wish was to be buried in Jerusalem, near the grave of her beloved aunt, Grand Duchess Elizabeth Feodorovna, who had also devoted her life to religious service. Her remains were initially interred at Windsor, but in 1988, her wish was fulfilled when they were moved to the Russian Orthodox Church of Mary Magdalene on the Mount of Olives. And here, in this sacred place, Alice's legacy would touch the very crown of England itself. When King Charles III was crowned in 2023, the holy oil used for his anointing was made from olives harvested in the Garden of Gethsemane, just meters below Alice's final resting place. The woman who had chosen poverty over palaces, service over status, had her spirit woven into the very fabric of the monarchy's most sacred ritual. Both Prince Charles and Prince William have made pilgrimages to her grave, paying tribute to the extraordinary woman who was their grandmother and great-grandmother. In 2018, Prince William's visit to Jerusalem marked the first official visit to Israel by a senior British royal, a journey that brought full circle the story of rescue and gratitude that began in wartime Athens. The story of Princess Alice of Battenberg teaches us that true nobility has nothing to do with titles or tiaras, and everything to do with the choices we make when faced with moral crisis. Born into privilege, marked by disability, tested by tragedy, she emerged as one of history's quiet heroes, a woman who understood that the greatest crown is the one invisible to the world, worn by those who choose compassion over comfort, courage over safety. Her deafness, once seen as a limitation, became her superpower. Her struggles with mental health, rather than defining her as broken, revealed the depth of her spiritual strength. Her choice to live in poverty demonstrated that true wealth lies in service to others. And her wartime courage proved that sometimes the most powerful resistance comes not from armies or governments, but from individuals who simply refuse to look away when others suffer. In our own times, when the world often seems divided by hatred and fear, Alice's example reminds us that each of us has the power to be someone's sanctuary, someone's hope, someone's salvation. We may not face the literal life and death choices she confronted, but we all encounter moments when we must decide whether to act with courage or turn away in comfort. The olive oil that anointed King Charles III carries within it the essence of the soil where Alice rests, a reminder that true majesty flows not from crowns or ceremonies, but from lives lived in service to others. Her legacy whispers to us across the decades that in a world that often celebrates the loud and the powerful, sometimes the greatest heroes are those who work in silence, who save lives without seeking recognition, who understand that the most profound victories are often invisible to history's grand narratives. Princess Alice of Battenberg, the deaf princess who heard the cries of the persecuted, the royal who chose poverty, the woman who proved that sometimes the greatest strength lies in what the world perceives as weakness. Her story reminds us that we are all capable of extraordinary courage, and that sometimes saving one family is the same as saving the world. Which aspect of Princess Alice's remarkable journey moved you most deeply? Was it her transformation of personal struggle into strength, her wartime courage in the face of unimaginable danger, or perhaps the way her legacy continues to touch the British monarchy today? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of quiet heroism and extraordinary courage resonated with you, please give this video a like. It helps ensure that more people discover these remarkable tales of royal history that deserve to be remembered. And if you're passionate about the untold stories of remarkable women who shaped our world, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss our journeys into the hidden chambers of history. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are those that have waited decades to be told, and the greatest treasures are not jewels or crowns, but the examples of courage that inspire us to be better than we ever thought possible. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you in our next exploration of the extraordinary lives that continue to illuminate our world.